Go Cranny 10.
So hi everyone, welcome to our third Careers Week talk. I'm delighted. I can't speak today apparently. Delighted to be welcoming Zack from Google, who's going to be giving the talk on live demos catching fire, hacking interviews with props, and juking into dream jobs. Which I found out actually a minute ago that juking means sidestepping in American football. I had to look that one up before, so we're always delighted to be joined by such incredible speakers, and this is one that I'm really looking forward to today. This is going to be an interactive session throughout today, so obviously chat is ready, so chat's already going mad. Um, Good morning. Ooh, interactive. Excited for this one, and been waiting for last week for this one. Not going to lie. So already the chat is moving, which is great to see. I'll moderate the chat and dive in. So any questions, anything you want to dive in with for Zach, put it in chat and I'll jump into that. And I guess without further ado, over to Zach, or as he's known on this meeting room, Cranny 10.
Cranny 10. Thank you very much, James. Hello, everyone. My name is Zack Akil. I'm a machine learning engineer and developer advocate at Google. And I'm going to be talking a bit about my sort of career path, but also mainly sort of like tips and tricks for different stages of like landing that first job in terms of like building portfolio, interviews, and actually when you start your first job, how can you do it with confidence and intention? So hopefully everyone's excited for that. I want to start with as or setting the stage of how I'm going to be doing this. I think it might be quite frantic at stages. I'm very passionate about this sort of area of interviews. I do a lot of interviews at Google, as in like being the interviewer, but I also do a lot of practice interviews. I just think it's a really sort of exciting time for, it's almost like testing yourself, your knowledge, your communication skills, your personal projects. Like it's an exciting time where you get to talk about everything you want to talk about. It's one of those few times in a career where it's all about you. It's all about you. So I can get quite passionate about this. So I recommend, if you don't already have it out, have like a piece of paper or like a Google Doc open maybe on the side where you can keep notes, because I'm going to be saying a lot of different things. And if anything in particular resonates with you, jot it down, because it's unlikely to be on the slides. I go off script quite a lot. So that's my recommendation. So have something at the ready to write those gems down, because I don't know when they're going to come. And it's different. Something's gold for someone, but not gold for someone else. So I'm just going to throw a lot of stuff out there and see what sticks with you. So hopefully everyone's ready for that. Bit of intro on me. Hi, I'm a developer advocate and machine learning engineer. I believe you actually already met someone or heard from someone who works in developer relations. So I am developer advocate, the almost the infantry of the developer relations. So I'm on the front lines doing developer advocacy. So what I specialize in is building stuff. I'm a developer by trade. So my background is in software engineering, full stack web development to be specific. In my A levels, I didn't do too well. I actually failed most of my A levels, and I went through clearing in the UK. If you're not familiar with that, it's kind of like the leftover spaces of universities. And there I saw a space for doing computer science at Plymouth University. Did that. It was amazing. It was the first time I ever actually did well in class, where I was just told, oh, try to build this thing. And I was kind of left to my own devices to work out how to do it. And as it turns out, I love doing that. I love independently trying to solve the problems and trying to learn the stuff I need to learn to solve the problem. So that was a really nice moment for me where I could see that, oh, actually, software engineering, that's what I want to do. It's
Did
a,
you know
it's
that you wanted to? So one of the questions, did you know you wanted to do software engineering when clearing came out, or was it just like, oh, that's
no,
available? Tell you what,
I
that
want
looks
to.
fun.
I tell you what happened. I was very last. I did no forethought during GCSEs and A levels. In my mind, the future did not exist.
Right.
Not in like a dystopia way. Just like I wasn't thinking ahead at all. I was just playing around. So I grew up in Northern Ireland. I was just playing in like farmlands with my mates. I wasn't thinking about like future careers and stuff.
Yeah.
I find it bizarre that we put that much amount of pressure to forward think at that age,
Yeah.
because yeah. So I wasn't thinking ahead. And then when the results came out, I was like, oh, I've got to make a decision. And when I was kind of pushed to choose, oh, what do you want your first choices to be? Iron Man had just came out that year, and so I wanted to be an aerospace engineer, like Tony
Wow.
Stark. That's
Nice.
what I want to be. So first choice was aerospace engineering, and then my first choice unis were all the unis that were near me. So in Northern Ireland, there was basically two universities to choose
Yeah.
from, Queen's and Ulster University. Didn't get into either of them. So then I went through clearing, and then I saw, oh, computer science. That sounds cool. Didn't really consider it. But I was like, oh, they've got spaces, and it sounds like kind of prestigious to do computer science. So, oh, maybe I'll try that. Did that, and I say that like it was a whimsical thing, like, oh, I just did it. No, it was a big decision. It was scary to
Right.
go there and to change everything, and the first time living outside the country, and yeah, it was terrifying. But then after like a couple of months, and I had that independence to work on my own stuff and learn stuff, it was special. Once you feel like, oh, this is solving problems, and I enjoy solving problems, and I can get paid to solve problems, that's like pretty fun. Like I love escape rooms, and I kind of think they're very similar, of like having that curiosity and that excitement for, oh, this is a puzzle that I can try to solve. And I think probably a lot of people listening can understand that, like solving puzzles is what we do, what we enjoy doing. So
Agreed. And I think
yeah.
there's a really good point there as well about sort of your comfort zone when you said, the first couple of months were really tricky when you first moved new country, new experience, new way of living essentially, obviously compared to school to university. But I think the thing that's always really important to say to people that are going into something, career switching and coming into tech or something is your comfort zone's this, right? And we always put you just outside of your comfort zone. But in a couple of months, your comfort zone grows, and that place that you're inhabiting now is just normal. And at
Mm,
first, it's always scary and it's always different, but actually, you just start inhabiting that zone, and you can and you will make it through that uncomfortable moment and that uncomfortable time.
absolutely, yeah. In fact, that's the now having been through that and continued to almost uh, I'm almost listening for when something is going to make me uncomfortable. And before I would back away from it, but
Yeah,
now it's been reinforced that, oh, actually these are the things that I should do more than anything. Like for example, a couple of weeks ago, I did like an improv class in London. So it's terrifying. I didn't want to do it, but I knew that, oh, I'm scared of doing this. I should probably do it. So you
incredible.
start eventually you realize actually that's like the life hack for maximum growth. If you have that the ability or the options to do something that's slightly like outside your comfort zone, like do it every time. Do it every
Perfect.
time. But wow, we're I'm not even through the first slide
Sorry,
yet,
dude.
and it's like so quick. But okay, yeah, I've got a lot of stuff. Okay, 5 years ago. So yeah, in terms of career path, I did do computer science at university. However, the degree didn't teach me loads about programming. I think it was you kind of treat it as like any other degree. What I learned more than anything was just how to work independently. So regardless of degrees or previous qualifications, that was what I took from my university course. What's funny is all of the technology that I use today at Google and in previous roles was actually learned outside of my degree. So through self-learning and online courses. So yeah, it's in hindsight, it's tricky to justify 4 years of my life, but I met good people and good fish and chips in Plymouth. Uh, on to today. So I did a degree. Then I've had two jobs since university, and I had an internship at university. Uh, the two jobs, the time span of those jobs is quite interesting. I pretty much out of university, I took the first job. That's distracting. I took the first job I could get. It was as a test developer, so I was purely just writing tests
Yep.
for other people's code, which sounds awful, and it was quite boring. It was quite boring, and during that time, however, I did kind of know that I was more interested in AI and machine learning, even though it wasn't actually taught during my course. It was right at the end of the course. Someone suggested, oh, you should try this online course about machine learning. You might find it interesting. Tried it, and it was the first time I was like, okay, before I thought I was going to be a generalist, but actually this is something I really am fascinated by, like objective learning algorithms, how you can teach machines to write their own code. I was like, this is so cool. I want to learn everything I can about this. I think that's like a key thing is like if there's any inkling of something you're more interested in doing within the field of tech, like follow that hard, like
Yeah.
chase that butterfly through the forest. So I did. I went to pretty much every meetup I could go to in London. I pretty much didn't need to buy food because I was having beer and pizza every day at every meetup. Because there was a lot at the time, like data science and machine learning meetups in London. There's loads, and I was doing a lot of online courses. If you check my LinkedIn and you look under my certifications, it is in hindsight, I don't know how I did so many courses, but I was just so every course made me want to learn even more about this topic. So online courses is actually where I learned how to do what I do now at my day job, where it's machine learning and AI, which is kind of funny. And yeah, in my first job as a test developer, I was there for about 6 months. And then I knew I wanted to work in AI machine learning, but at the time I was working in .NET and web stack stuff because that was my skill set was in web stuff. But I knew I wanted to learn more about machine learning and AI. And as I did these certificates and put them on my LinkedIn, recruiters started seeing them and reaching out about AI related roles. And eventually one reached out about a data science company that needed a web developer
Nice.
that would code the web stuff in Python. I'm like, this is like the perfect transition.
Yeah.
I want to work close to AI and machine learning, but my tool set is in web, but I am learning Python. I'm like, this is the ramp. This is the ramp to where I want to be. It's not about, I kind of realized that I'm never going to jump straight into the role I want, but I can get as close as I can to that role. And that's where you can like shimmy into it. If you're in a company and they have an option, the fact that you're already there, they're going to prioritize you over an external hire. So if you want to work somewhere, just get as close as you can physically to it. You don't need to be doing the job, but if there's a company that's doing something around that area and they need someone of your current skill set, that's like the perfect transition.
So, someone's just asked, you said, what certificates were you doing? Sorry, so it's just LinkedIn Learning certificates. So the short courses on LinkedIn, which you
Yes,
get a
so
level of
it was
accreditation.
Coursera. Coursera was the
Nice.
was the place. I think the reason I did Coursera because there was that machine learning course that they have, and I think I had a bit of a like imposter syndrome and insecurity around the fact that I didn't go to a prestigious university. And the interesting thing about Coursera is they have like prestigious universities tied to the courses. So on my CV, I put that I did a certificate with Stanford University in machine learning, which is technically true. And I put it like as education, it was Stanford online Coursera machine learning.
Yeah.
So I was like, I think that was why Coursera was such a big draw for me. It had those prestigious names that I kind of wanted on my CV. I don't know in
So,
hindsight if that really made a difference that it was said Stanford uh, as much as the fact that it said machine learning online course. But yeah, interesting background. Oh, I'm not even through the first
sorry.
slide. Okay, I'm gonna try to power through this because we don't need the whole history. Right now, I build and talk about things. You've heard about DevRel, maybe. I build stuff. I'm a developer by trade, but I'm also an educator and speaker. Turns out speaking in public terrified me, but it was that thing of I knew I got an option to give a talk at a meetup, and I was like, I don't want to do that, but I know I should. So I did it, and I was like, that was terrifying. I was a nervous wreck. I knew it was probably terrible for the attendees, but afterwards I was like, that was kind of exciting. And also I had to learn the subject matter a lot deeper to
Yeah.
feel comfortable speaking about it. And that's why if you get any option to either mentor, teach, or present, take it. The kind of the pressure that puts on you to learn something so deeply that you feel comfortable teaching it to others is it's good pressure. It's a good pressure and it's a great experience because that is the most sought after skill, I think, most probably undervalued, but people still value it very highly, but maybe they value technical ability higher than communication skills. However, I think communication is top. Communication is top. And we're actually taught as interviewers at Google that that is the priority, is how well you work with people and
Mm.
how well you can communicate your ideas and that kind of thing. So if you get a chance to test those communication skills to the max where you're presenting your ideas to a group of people, take it. That's like every time. Even though you will be terrified and you will think that you don't know enough, everyone feels that way. That's like I still feel that way having done this for 5 years sometimes about some topics, but that's good fear. it's good for you. Listen to that.
If you ever go on a presentation course, what they'll do is they'll record you presenting because internally you feel like you're shaking and you look terrible and you look like a nervous wreck, but actually on the outside no one can tell. So I think that's always a big tell about presenting and stuff is you might feel awful and most people feel awful on the inside, but on the outside you still look like a duck on water. So don't worry about it, just go for it.
Exactly that. Exactly that. People think they look more nervous than they are. And at conferences, classically, people will be like, "Oh, I must have been so shaky and nervous," and then I'd be like, "No, you're perfect. You seem fine. Everyone is great."
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great opportunities to give talks. Uh, Onwards. Actually, I want to. This is a bit of an. I want to know who in the audience has built stuff with AI. So I would throw that. There'll probably be a bit of delay, so I'll continue forward. But let me know, James, how many people have built their own AIs. I'll come back to that.
I know for sure that some people on the course early on were using AI, maybe not built their own AI, but were using AI until we said, "Do you really know what that AI is telling you at the moment?" Because they were
Oh,
using it to code, and it's like it has its place. Anyway, yes, carry on.
okay. With the new stuff. Okay, interesting. The new AIs. Yeah, they're all the rage. Gen AI. But okay, moving on. God, this is so. We should have made the session 4 hours long. Uh, we have three topics I want to cover. I haven't even got into it. Portfolios, interviews, and your first role. These are kind of in chronological order. Things you probably should be focusing on now. So if you have not got an interview yet, you should be working on your portfolio. If you have got your interview, you should be thinking about what you're going to do in your first role, that kind of thing. So this is the order of focus, I think. So I'm going to cover these in order as well. Portfolios is my favorite, so we're going to start there. And I want to talk about GitHub. I think everyone should have a GitHub and should be adding stuff to it. I think that's a given. I'm going to talk a bit about some of the projects that are on my GitHub. And before I get into this, I find my interview track record, I think is quite interesting. Is that I think of all the interviews I've had, my success rate of being offered a job is around 50%, which is extremely high, extremely high. And I think the reason comes down to my portfolio projects. Because when you see some of my portfolio projects, in hindsight, now on the other side of the table, having that perspective of, oh, if I'm interviewing someone and they show me a project like this, oh, of course it's going to show really well. So I believe like your portfolio project, that is where you can do most of the heavy lifting
Right.
of the interview. If you get a really good project on your GitHub, it can basically lead the interview. And to tell you something that happened is during my Google interviews, we do like 7 or 8 of them. For some of those interviews, 100% of the conversation was about my portfolio projects. 0% was talking about my previous education, and I do not recall ever talking about my previous roles. All of that was focused on my projects that I'd done in my spare time and put on GitHub, which goes to show that I believe this is where the most value can be added to your just profile.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
they're incredible if you get them right. And in fact, I'm going to talk about how to get them right. So we got your GitHub and you got your CV. Both of these places you should have your projects present in a really visible way. So getting to learn some of the sort of power features of GitHub. And in fact, let me show you some examples. So here is my GitHub. There's a pinning option for pinning projects. Your coolest project, your best project, the way as an interviewer I'm looking at someone is I'm going to go to their GitHub. Hopefully it's very visible on their CV. Here is my GitHub, put the
Yeah.
logo there, put the link there. Make it, if it's a PDF, which I recommend everyone making their CVs PDFs, make that link clickable, because you can actually make like clickable links in PDFs. Like make it as easy as possible for the interviewer to do the thing you want them to do. If you want them to see your project, make that super easy. So I'm coming here, and if I'm looking at my own portfolio, I'm like, oh, here's a person. Oh, they've got this top project. I'm just going to look at their top project, and I'm going to click on it. And I'm going to go, oh, they did this thing. There's a README. Make sure you have a README, and they've got a GIF in it. Oh, that's pretty cool. GIFs are better than images, and images are better than nothing. So this is excellent. I love seeing this. This kind of talking about what it does. Oh, and there's links. This is a link. This is a link. Let me click on this. And here's it. So this is the biggest missed opportunity I've seen in interviewing candidates is if they built something, especially a web app. I, as an interviewer, I want to see it and I want to use it.
Yep.
The best portfolio projects are interactive ones that I can actually play with. If you let me do that, I love that as an interviewer. I can ask so many questions about this now that I can actually play with it. Versus I've interviewed people where they say, oh, they built this web front end. I'm like, oh, cool. Can I play with it? And they're like, oh no, you have to like deploy it to Heroku. And I'm like, why, if it's just a web front end, do I need like to spin up a whole back end to play around with it? You can use GitHub Pages to host your front ends for free and have them integrated. So if you're not familiar, learn about GitHub Pages because they basically offer you free static site hosting. So it is a perfect place to put your own portfolio projects, make them interactive in a way that people can actually use them. And this is free. So I've got my personal website hosted via GitHub Pages. I've got this app hosted via GitHub Pages. I pay nothing for hosting costs,
Yeah.
and it's integrated right into the project. So this is, I would call this like gold standard of a portfolio project. It's something that's interactive that the interviewer can easily play with. Don't know if there's comments on that, James.
Well, I think the thing for me on that, there's a few comments. I'm just trying to order them in the time issue. But I think the thing for me there is the longer someone's spending interacting with something you've built, the more share of mind you're going to get, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, I remember that project, I remember that person, I remember how that made me feel. So you're absolutely right. There's a few questions here. I think a couple of them are about what kind of projects, what would you recommend, which obviously is something you've just gone through. If I
Yeah.
wanted to get started with AI, what would you recommend? How would I get started to make a project with it? If you,
Oh, oh, that's good. Someone talking about AI. I'll show that right now in the span of a couple of minutes. I've built a lot of projects using this tool called Teachable Machine. And I'll show you how easy it is to build a model with Teachable Machine. This is building image classification. And I can say, let's build an app which is going to say if I'm speaking on the phone or not versus this. And in the span of less than a minute, I should have trained an image classifier that now for a teacher who's trying to give a class and says we don't want people on their phone. Now we've got a model there, and this allows you to export the fully trained model as an HTML app, which you can take this exact code, throw it onto GitHub Pages, and now you have a fully hosted machine learning model app that's interactive that people can play around with. So
I think
I've
we've now
done
already
things.
got 10 students who've got that as their first project. No, joking.
But this is like if you know the right tools, this is the fantastic tool for building machine learning apps where you can learn a bit about training data, image classifiers, and more importantly, it's interactive.
The chat
Portfolio
is going
projects that are
crazy at the
interactive
moment.
are pardon.
The chat is going crazy. There's not just like, wow, this is nuts. Oh my God, mind blown. How is this possible? So yeah, I think that one's gone down quite well. Thank you for that.
There we go. Teachable machine. I use this all the time for building prototypes, but even like playing around with stuff. They've got audio classifiers as well. I've built like a crowd and boo detector, put it in an HTML app with like a bar that grows. So you've got like the crowd is cheering and the bar goes and the thing. So it's a subtle thing that I've also demonstrated is not just using technology for the sake of using it. I made sure that there was a story as I was even just
Yeah,
showing this example. I was saying, like, oh, I want a detector that's going to detect if someone is on their phone during a call or not. That's also kind of key to a good portfolio project is there kind of needs to be a story as to why you're building it. That's going to make talking about it a lot easier because you can ground it to like, oh, this was a problem that I tried to solve. You
yeah.
start with the problem and then you use the technology.
Because I
It's a
think
bit
what
tricky when we are trying to actually, demonstrate machine learning knowledge and we are kind of starting with the technology first and we're putting in the story in retroactively. But whatever the case, any demonstration of technology should have a reasonable story as to why you've done that, why you've built this thing to solve this problem. I think that makes talking about the project so much easier because people love stories. If you're just talking about tech for the sake of tech, it can be a bit dry. But if you
yeah.
marry it to a story of like, oh, I'm in a lot of meetings and it's very rude when people are on their phone. So I realized, oh, I can use machine learning to automatically detect when people are on their phone and like give them a ping to be like, oh, by the way, your camera's on or something. So having a story to your projects is like a really powerful way of making sure they land well when you're talking about them.
Incredible.
Uh, so that's how you build AI in 1 minute
There you go. Perfect.
for machine. But yes, because I've got there's multiple things when it comes to projects on GitHub that I've seen, and some show better than others. So we have tutorials versus projects. So I've interviewed people, and all they have on their GitHub is like a to-do list app that they did as part of a course. As an interviewer, that tells me next to nothing about what you can actually do in a role. Because hypothetically, anybody can follow a tutorial, whether you're technical or not technical. That's not so much the quality of you as a developer, that's the quality of the tutorial. It's a good tutorial, great, you followed through it. If it was a bad tutorial, I don't know. I can't go and vet how good of a tutorial it was. So you showing me the output of a tutorial tells me almost nothing about you as a developer. That is where projects, or projects is kind of a vague word, but projects that are not curriculum, non-curriculum projects. So what I want to see, especially from a junior developer, is can you take something you've learned and apply it to a new problem? That is the gold that I'm looking for, is can you take learnings and apply them? So that's why I've got this saying is make projects that only you could have made. So this is where I could learn about machine learning, and I could apply it to recognizing digits on a piece of paper. Now, how many people in the world could have come up with the same idea, or hypothetically done that? I'm like, quite a lot, because that's like the vanilla project that a lot of people solve, optical character recognition. So I wouldn't say that's a good project. However, I have a strong interest in rugby. And when I was growing up, I would try to record matches with my phone. And then when I was playing, I wanted other people to record them, but they weren't as interested in that. So I was like, what if I could build a robot that would do that for me? And that's what I did. And that's actually the project I talked about when I was interviewing at Google. So here's the my rugby recording robot. I gave this presentation at Google. I set the scene being like, here's when uh, here's when I recorded rugby matches, and here's when my friends recorded rugby matches. They like, and I was like, this is a problem. There's a problem. I want to solve this with AI. So I learned how to build a model with Raspberry Pi. I glued all this stuff together, and then we had a robot that could follow the rugby action. And the key question that's really interesting about this project is when people ask, oh, if they know who I am and they're wondering who made this thing, even if they know loads of developers, they'll be like, Zack made that because he's the only one I know who likes AI and rugby,
Yeah.
and he likes building stuff. I'm like, this is a beautiful project to talk about because it combines genuine interest. It is unarguably a showcase that I can learn something and apply it, because nobody else is interested enough in both these things to apply them. Only I am. So these kind of projects where it's combining your genuine interests and a new technology, like those are gold. And because it's a genuine interest, it has an added benefit of, I think you've already heard this kind of this recommendation of, it shows me as a person.
Yeah.
It tells, I don't need to say, oh, I'm interested in rugby, because I've already covered that in the project that I made. Like, oh, I'm a fully round person. I've got hobbies and stuff, and I've combined my hobbies with my passion for AI and learning. I built this one project that perfectly encapsulates the fact that I'm interested in AI. I know how to learn stuff, because actually throughout this project, I talked about how it didn't work quite as well, so I had to take some courses online, and I invented this data set to help me learn about this new type of AI model that would be better at tracking things. And so as part of the built into the project, when I was talking about it, I'm talking about, here's the independent learning I did, and here's how I applied it to my own use case that I am genuinely passionate about. And these kind of projects, which combine your actual interests, you can tell now I'm very excited by it. So if you're in an interview and you're showing this much enthusiasm
Yeah.
and excitement, like, people want to work with people who are enthusiastic.
And I think
So
the thing for me there as well is coming through here is you're more willing, you're going to be more willing to do that research, go that extra mile because ultimately you want to finish building the thing because you care about seeing it done. Whereas sometimes if we were being forced to do something, it's like, oh, do I really want to research that new model, for example, because it's not building something that I actually want to see in the real world. So that's something that we talk about when you're building those projects after you finish the boot camp is find something you really want to do because guess what? You're probably more likely going to do it than if you just do something that's like, people are saying here, stay away from movie databases, to-do lists, stay away from, the Pokemon API indexes. It's like everyone's done one. It's like find your niche. Sure, you might like Pokemon, but what can you do different with it, for example?
Exactly. Do projects only you could have done. That's like, and I know I love that point. I actually have an analogy for this, although it's a really obscure analogy. Although I think it's what you're saying around. I wanted to build this because I cared about the end results. I cared so much about I want to record rugby matches, and the goal to solve this problem, I had to learn these very complicated technologies. And I, as my A level results show, I'm not good when it comes to like learning stuff for the sake of learning stuff. I'm much better. I think everyone is. I'm better at learning stuff for the sake of my own personal goal. I want to get here. I want this thing to exist. So that learning journey is way. I feel way more motivated through it, and I almost think of it as like you're. Imagine you're in a lake and it's filled with lily pads. And all these lily pads are like the technologies to learn. And if you go through and try to collect all the lily pads, it's going to be hard work. You're swimming and trying to carry and stuff. But if you've got a personal project, that's almost like a winch at the other side of the lake that will just pull you through the lake. Like, oh, I can stay locked in, and naturally, without me having to like reach out and grab stuff, I'm going to collect all these learnings, all these lily pads as I get to the other side of the lake. And it might not be a comprehensive knowledge of that entire field. It will be this one path of how do you use this technology to solve this specific problem. So you won't collect all the lily pads. But guess what? When you get to the end, the other side of that lake, you'll have another project and you'll go through the lake at a different angle. And you
Yeah.
might learn a slightly different technology or slightly different way of using this thing. And so that's why, like, after you've done like 4 or 5 of these projects, you can have a very comprehensive knowledge of not just an individual piece of technology, but what's more important is how those different pieces of technology connect together. And that's why I believe like end-to-end projects are some of the most valuable. It's not just learning about a machine learning model, it's learning about how you connect a machine learning model to run on a Raspberry Pi that then moves a physical arm. Those little bits of knowledge of connecting things together, it almost multiplies your ability. If you just know how to make a machine learning model, great. But if you know how to make a machine learning model and a web app, now you've got two to the power of two number of things you
Yeah.
can build. So this is why like I prefer, and I have a little point in terms of big and little projects. A lot of little projects that combine a couple of technologies are so powerful for your project because those learnings, those ways of connecting things, that's what businesses actually need. Businesses, unless it's a huge enterprise that has a very specialized team, most businesses need people who know how to connect things together. Not so much how to do this one thing, but I want you to know how do you do this one thing in the presence of all these other technologies so that you not just build a machinery model, but you're aware of, oh, I need to build a model in this format so that it works in this framework so that it can be deployed on this like kind of application. So that holistic end-to-end knowledge is really powerful. And that's why I think if you're doing web development, it can be taboo to call yourself a full stack engineer, but that's what you should be aiming for. Know a bit about how to build the back end, the database, and connect it to the front end. And anything else you learn, almost think about how you can chuck that into the mix. So when I started as a full stack engineer, and I think by far the most powerful uh, piece on my like resume for interviewing about machine learning jobs, even though they didn't require it, is that I knew how to put machine learning into a web app. I knew how to get that into an integrated like full stack thing. So you're constantly building on your full stack of knowledge. So if you learn something completely separate, like if you learn about VR or 3D animations, like, oh, how do I get a 3D model into a web app that I already know how to build? That's what, as I said, that's what like to the power of n, to the power of 3, to the power of 4, however skills you know, as if they connect to each other, you're multiplying your almost knowledge, your ability to build stuff. So a lot of little end-to-end projects are amazing, especially if they're interactive and they're inspired by your genuine passion. Those are like gold dust. People love talking about them. You would love talking about them, and people love listening about those kind of projects. Anything from you, James, on that?
I think people are just here talking about making sure that you are pushing portfolio pieces, and someone's actually just summing up is saying if you just know how to make a machine model, great. If you know how to combine your skill sets, that's the power. So I think that people are just agreeing really and taking that in. So yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Yeah. A lot of I recommend uh so I recommend, GitHub and CV, get your GitHub visible in your CV. I recommend projects over tutorials. Tutorials are great for your learning, but in terms of finding roles, they don't really showcase, you as a person, and that skill that you're looking for in junior developers, which is independent and applied learning.
Yeah,
That's what I want a junior developer for. I don't want them so much for what I know they can do, but I want them to demonstrate that they know how to learn stuff and apply it. That is that
correct.
skill that you're trying to highlight in your project. So show off that you're learning, show that you learned something new and applied it. That's like the power.
I think
Uh,
that's one thing we always try and say is, we have two major projects through the boot camp, but it's, take some time off afterwards because it's been 14 weeks straight of intense learning. Take a few days, but then find out what your next project is. What do you want to build? What do you want to use your knowledge for? Because exactly as you say, that's what an employer is looking for. They want to see that one, you love the technology, you love what you do, so you're continuing to use it, and two, you've got that ability to bring the outside world into your passion. I think that's exactly right.
Absolutely. With regards to big projects versus little projects, I believe, like as I said, like end to end is everything in terms of showing that you can apply it into an application. And the smaller the project, the better, because then you can do more of them and you can do more of that end-to-end development. Versus if you have one big project, for example, you maybe set up the authentication once, you maybe set up the GitHub repo once, you maybe make the README once. Versus if you have a lot of little projects, guess what? Now you have 5 times the experience of setting up the repo, 5 times the experience of setting up authentication, 5 times the experience of doing all these things which you classically only do once in a big project. Versus if you have a lot of little project, you get to go through that end-to-end cycle and you get to start from scratch a lot. And I believe that's one of the most valuable things in learning is quite often in a big project, it gets messy, spaghetti code. You don't want to go through and refactor everything. Oftentimes you wish, oh, can I just get rid of this and start from scratch? I'm like, yeah, you should do that. You should do a lot of little projects where you get to start from scratch. How would you do this if you could start over? And if you do that more often, you'll find that your polish, your quality of code will increase exponentially, I think. So start from scratch a lot if you can. Solo versus team projects. I've interviewed people where all they had on their resume was team projects. I had to spend most of the interview working out what they actually did, and I didn't really trust. Like it was kind of suspicious. So you absolutely need some solo projects that you know every in and out about, that I can confidently, as an interviewer, quickly be like, oh, I know you can do this because this is a solo project that you did and you've done everything in it. So it's very important that you have not just a team project that shows you can work as part of a team, but solo projects are where I can actually get to what you can actually do with confidence as an interviewer. So if you just have team projects on your GitHub, it's very hard as an interviewer to work out what you can actually do.
Great.
Uh,
So there's a question coming here. I was trying to just decipher it. Just to double check, as an interviewer, you prefer to see skills and experience over a degree with no projects. So, so essentially, you're hiring someone based purely on their GitHub or on other things as well.
so I can only speak as an individual interviewer because it's the Wild West out there. Everyone's doing something completely different. Some companies are very like, we want people with a degree. Some people are more, I just want to see what you can actually do. I'm going to look at your GitHub and I'm going to give you a coding interview and I'm going to look at your communication. And what's perfect is that leads right into the next section, which it turns out I've allocated 5 minutes for, which is around interviews. Loads of stuff to cover. We're not going to go into. But in terms of what I care about, me as an interviewer at Google, is number one, your communication skills. I have to work with you more than anything else. I need you to be able to communicate to me how you're working through the problem. I need you to be able to be aware and open about what you know, but also as importantly, what you don't know. Because if I'm going to be there for you, potentially mentoring you, the worst thing you can do is say, oh, I know how to do this, and then you struggle and you clearly don't know how to do it. Because I'm like, you're actually hurting both of us by doing that. You're actually not helping, and I don't expect you to know everything. I don't expect anybody to know everything. I forget stuff. I don't know what most acronyms are internally at Google, and I have to say, what does that acronym mean? I don't know what that
Yeah.
means.
And
But
it's
being
something we always say is like if you're asking something, two other people in the room are probably wondering it as well. So be the person that can speak up, use your voice to ask that question.
Absolutely. So your first skill above all else is your communication, how well we can work together. And at least the interviews at Google, we operate in a way where I'm trying to see if I give you a coding problem, I'm not expecting you to go off in silence to work on it. I'm actually expecting it to be a communication, a dialogue, almost a collaboration of how you're going to solve this problem. And if there's any things that you know you don't know, like, oh, it's working with this email server, which I don't know, or this like times I'm not good at, you can say like, oh, actually, I'm not 100%. I don't know how to get like a new date in Python. And I'll be like, oh, actually, that's just new.date. I'm like, oh, cool, thanks. And I can add that in. Like, that's how actual programming works.
Yep.
So having that dialogue, that communication of awareness of here's what I know, here's what I don't know, and I'm going to talk you through everything because that's how I'm going to work with you. I'm going to work with you by asking you questions when I don't know something, and I'm going to work independently when I do know something. So that's the main thing: is communication above everything else. Then, as a junior, I want you to be able to learn something new at a reasonable rate. I want you to be fast at learning and applying it. So if I tell you, oh, the way you do this is you do new.date, and that's how you create a new date, I expect you to be like, oh, okay, cool. You write that down and you've applied that knowledge. I'm looking out for those things of when I tell you something or give you new knowledge, are you able to take that in, understand it, and apply it? And if you don't understand it, to be able to communicate that, oh, actually, okay, that doesn't quite make sense. How does that work with that? If I'm doing that, and I'm like, oh, well, it's like this and this and this. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, okay, now I understand it now, and I can apply it with confidence. So that ability to learn something fast and apply it in the interview, you can demonstrate within the coding example. But again, if you've built portfolio projects that already exemplify that, that does a lot of the heavy lifting to
Yeah.
demonstrate that I can learn fast and I can apply it. So that's the key skill I'm looking at for, especially in junior developers. And then the last one, and by far the least important, is what you can currently do compared to everything else. What you are, your current ability, that is the thing I'm least interested in. At least as a junior developer, I know you're not going to know as much as a senior developer. That's what a senior developer is hired for. They're hired for what they can know. A junior developer is hired for what they can know. So I want you to demonstrate that you can learn stuff. You can go out, you know kind of how to find the answer versus actually knowing the answer off the bat. So that's my priority of what I expect or what I care about as an interviewer, specifically at Google hiring junior developers. But again, at different places. And in fact, when you speak to the recruiters, they'll tell you, oh, they're looking for someone with a degree or something. They want someone more like this. That's the kind of thing where it's fact finding. So yeah, it's a jungle out there. So it's fact finding, using the recruiters to work out exactly what they're kind of looking for and making
Yep.
sure that you're communicating that. And that kind of always comes down to communication. You're trying to work out what they are interested in hearing, and you're going to try to give them as much of that as you can.
I think you've answered a couple of questions in chat there that's basically said a lot of junior roles are asking for degrees or 2 years experience. And again, what you said here is a fact-finding mission. You need to go and take that away. Um, in terms of coding interviews, do you have like a set bank of coding challenges you always use, or do you vary it up?
It's constantly changing because they get leaked and then people will
Oh,
learn
really?
about them. So a lot of people, all the interviewers have their own individual questions that they use. So yeah, we come up with our own and then we test them against each other and stuff. So we love coding challenges. So we come up with loads. If you're looking to see the kind of ones that Google uses, Leak Code is a very popular website, and they have kind of the standard set pretty good in terms of the standard of questions. Usually, like a medium Leak Code question is a pretty average Google question, medium to expert, and then you can expect the easy Leak Code question to be like junior developer questions that we give first time. So you can get an easy Leak Code question, like if you can do that easily, then you should be feeling very confident in yourself.
Thank you for that.
Uh, I've got a few things. I want to talk about props because I mentioned this in the title. During my interview at Google, I actually had like some of my projects that I built hung up behind me intentionally in view of the camera, and that gave the aura that look how passionate I am. And they're like, "Oh, have you ever built a project about something?" It's like, oh, well, I built this thing. So you can use props. And the interviewer after I joined said that was actually a huge thing. It was very exciting to see how like I'm so enthusiastic that it is all around me what I'm interested in. So especially if it's a virtual interview, take your surroundings into account. Uh don't take intention with how you're framing yourself visually. And if you've got like books that you can put behind you that are like tech books, all the better. Like it's creating that first impression that this is a person who's passionate and interested that I want on my team. Because look how passionate they are. So that's how I use props to kind of help give that impression of how passionate and enthusiastic I am. Um, there's a lot of stuff. The main one I think that's useful to know is I've heard about people when they're doing interviews, they'll like interview at one place and then like they won't do any more interviews because they'll wait to hear back from them. Don't do that. I think it's a numbers game. It's a numbers
Right.
game. You have no loyalty to a place that you just interviewed to. At least in my opinion, I'm like, you do not need to
Agreed.
wait for them to come back. You go get your interviews. You go get your interviews, and you don't stop until you sign that paper.
Agreed.
And that's my approach. Also, there's this phrase of like that's good, which is you kind of want to be your own advocate of the position you're in. If you get rejected, that's good. It looked like it wasn't a good fit, and now I know a bit more about the kind of coding interview stuff. And then you get rejected again, I'm like, okay, that's good. I learned a bit about the questions they asked, and it seems like it wasn't quite the right fit, but I do like that vibe of company, so I'm gonna look for more of those companies. And then the next time you get rejected, it's like, okay, that's good. It was a bit better vibes, but I think I want to be a bit more where there's mentoring opportunities. Like, and I got rejected there. I was like, okay, that's good. So take every single step as a forward step. So if you get rejected, there's always something you can kind of learn or take away from it. Don't let it beat you down. Don't let it remove anything from you. You are better because of it. And the position you're in now is even stronger because you have that experience. So every experience is valuable. So advocate for you are in the best position you can be in because of your background, because of your unique experiences, because you're self-taught, because you changed your career to pursue this. Like everything you've done puts you in the best position you can possibly be in. So don't let any experience think that you're not in the best position you could possibly be in. You are with that experience, that is valuable experience. So get into that mindset. Very powerful. And it means that
Great.
if you keep going, you'll get there. The last one is challenge versus fear mindset to problems. This is something that I've seen in people, and it really divides people in terms of when I'm trying to find like the most enthusiastic person is if I show you a very difficult problem, your reaction to it can tell me whether or not you're the kind of person I want on my team. If you react to a difficult problem like, oh, okay, versus if I show you a difficult problem, you're like, oh, okay, this is interesting. So that difference of excitement to solve the problem versus fear of not solving the problem, that is that's a huge thing, and that can actually disrupt you a lot in an interview because that can put you into a bad flow, and then it can just kind of go downhill from there. And it's not built in; it's a learned skill, and you can change your mindset even from interview to interview. I've done an interview where I went into that fear mindset and it felt terrible. I felt so bad. I felt like I screwed up everything. Versus another interview where they gave me a difficult problem. And I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. It's going to be. I'm very curious to see what the answer is. And I think this resonates a lot when I'm doing escape rooms. So if I do an escape room and one of the puzzles I couldn't get, I'm like really excited to figure out from the game master, like, oh, what was the solution to this? I'm excited to like know, okay, so in the next time I'll know how to solve that. So being excited by, oh, this is a difficult problem, and I'm excited by the experience and knowledge that I'm going to get from it when it's solved. Or if I solve it, that's going to be exciting. So getting into that, like, be excited by problems versus being scared of them. And it is a mindset, and it's a learned mindset. And the more you do it, the easier it'll be, the more natural it'll be, and the more fun it is to work with someone who's like that.
Right.
I don't want to
Right.
work with someone who's negative and scared, and it makes me negative and scared. Like, I want someone who's like, oh, we've got like this huge database problem. I'm like, oh, really? Oh, okay. If you solve it, let me know, and I can help. What is it? And it's again like it's a mindset, and it makes you very workable with. I want to work with someone who's got that
Yep.
mindset.
No, for sure.
Uh, quick whiz through, and when you start your first role in 5 minutes, asking actually it's a short section, and it's very key. Asking questions is always good. We need people who can ask questions when they're stuck. Asking a question like, what's the API key, is a terrible question. James, why is it a terrible question?
I don't know. I'm not a developer. Why is it a terrible question?
Terrible question. You don't want to ask that. I don't want to know the no. I do want to know the API key, but that question gives the sense that you maybe, first of all, you haven't told me that you've tried to look for it yourself
Yeah,
first.
fair.
I think a better phrasing and a kind of flow to get into when asking questions is, first of all, more than anything else, I want to become an independent worker. But I
Yeah.
want to start as an independent learner. I can come in being an independent learner. So first off, I'm going to say, oh, I looked for the API key here and it wasn't there. Where can I find out
Of course.
where the API key is?
Yeah.
I don't want you just to give me the answer. I want you to show me where I can find the rest of the answers.
I thought it was going to be something a lot more technical, like, you know, there was some reason why you couldn't just ask that. I don't know. But
Like,
yes.
they're all in the cloud. You don't need to ask.
It's
No,
like, yeah, come on.
yeah, it's the thinking of the question versus I don't want you to give me the answer. I want you to enable me to find the answer on my own.
Right.
I've worked with people in the past who are enthusiastic, who are interested in the technology, but I basically had to handhold them across every task because as soon as they got into a slight hiccup, they didn't really push to solve the problem themselves, even though
Yeah.
they already had the knowledge to solve it or they had the tools and access. And then when they asked me for my help, they didn't really want to be shown how to solve it themselves. They just wanted the answer. And it's very frustrating to work with people like that. So try not to be that. Try not to just ask the answer. Really try to become an independent worker
There's a
as soon as
process you can do for that, right? Like the process is, give yourself 5 minutes to consider the questions that you'd ask someone else. If you can't do that, go away and, potentially Google to try and self-serve the answer. And then when you're going back into speaking to someone about this, say, look, I couldn't find the API key. These are the things that I've tried to find it. I still can't find it. What would you recommend to be able to go find it? Because then they're showing that development, right?
absolutely. And there's a balance to this because obviously you don't want to spend your whole day trying to find a simple answer which someone you already know they did know the answer,
Yeah.
but you wanted to work it out on yourself, and that's just being stubborn. So there's a balance between being independent learner and being a stubborn person. And I feel like the tactic for this is give yourself a reasonable time box. So for this, an API key, I don't want to spend more than maybe 5 minutes trying to find it.
Yeah.
Beyond that, people might get frustrated that you spent so long trying to find it. So I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to take 5 minutes to try to solve this myself. If I can't, I'm going to speak to my mentor or someone to be like, okay, I tried to find the API key here, here, and here, couldn't find it. Where should I be looking to find the API key? So give yourself a time box, a reasonable time box, and kind of stick to that. I know it can be like, if you feel like, oh, I'm getting close to solving it, I'm like, I gave myself 10 minutes. I don't want to piss people off. Let me now ask like my mentor or my manager or something. So time box, and also you're working to become an independent worker, but you can start as an independent learner. That's the kind of goal. I want you to be really focused on trying to work things out yourself, eager to do it, eager to try to figure it out yourself, but also be mindful of actually they know the knowledge and I'm going to time box it and then I'm going to go to them with I want to be able to figure this out in the future. That is what I want to learn. This is why it's a good one. You try to solve it independently first, and now you don't care about the answer, but you care about where you can find out the answer. Like in an escape room environment, when I find out the answer to the puzzle, I don't necessarily care about that, but I want to know how was I supposed to figure that out. That's what I'm really curious about because that's what I can actually apply going forward. Versus, oh, that's the answer. Cool. I'll ask you the answer again in the future. Uh, Find a mentor, setting expectations, document everything. If there is an opportunity to like get a mentor assigned to you, do that, take that, and develop that dialogue with them as soon as possible. Setting expectations, it's really important to ask. Just to take the stress off you, you can ask your manager or your hiring manager, be like, okay, what is expected from me in the first 6 months? Because a lot of times people go in thinking that, oh, I need to start building stuff. I need to build a whole app. I need to do this. I need to have this huge amount of impact. You need to make sure you get your expectations set and you're aware of here's what's expected of me. And usually it's a lot less than you expect. My manager at Google, this is bold, but he said, I don't expect any impact from you in the first year. But that was extreme. Google could put that investment in. Maybe it's a startup and maybe they expect, oh, I don't expect any real work from you in the first 2 weeks. But we don't know. We don't know. It's different for every role. So
Yep.
ask and find that out. And then finally, you are an expert as a junior developer in that company. So document everything, and you never know how much impact you can have on just the onboarding process. So everything you're doing, API keys, access to things. If they don't already have a wiki where they show you, here's the things you need to know, write all that down and show that. Be like, oh, by the way, if someone else joins, here's the things that are really useful to me. Here's the little bugs in the HR system that you need to know. Document everything, because that in itself is a huge amount of impact that you can already make as a junior developer at a new company. With that, quick things I recommend reading. The Pragmatic Programmer is an amazing book. I recommend reading that a lot. It actually doesn't go too much into the specifics of programming, but more of the holistic philosophy of being programmatic. And even just saying that you've read a book about programming makes you sound so expert. I cannot tell you, like, very few people actually go out of their way to read a book about programming in their spare time. So already doing that puts you in like the top 5% of developers. And then The Design of Everyday Things, fantastic book. It gives you a bit more sensitivity to what things are and aren't in your control when it comes to problems to solve. And it's a fantastic book, not about coding, just about design in general. And yeah, those are my two all-time books that have definitely had the most impact on me as a developer, uh, with regards to how I think about things and how I notice bugs and issues to solve. With that, thank you all so much. Apologies for the rush at the end, but it was also so juicy. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer any future questions people might have.
I think we're sort of timed out, and I don't know what your meeting room situation is there as well.
We'll see if someone comes up. I'll just pick it up and I'll keep you on my laptop. But
Okay, awesome.
we'll go as
Are you
long as
okay for a couple of minutes of questions? Is
yeah,
that
yeah.
okay?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Um, the first one is, would you recommend going into a small company or a big company for your first role?
I can only advocate for my own position. I went into a small companies, so startups. The beauty of that is you usually get to do a lot of little things, which is good as a junior developer. You want to really almost diversify your experience as much as possible. In a larger company, you might be able to do that, but it would tend to be like more of a structured program, and it's very hit and miss. Whereas in a startup, you know that you are going to be asked to do this and that and all these different things. So I think I did a startup. Other people did different companies. I find the startup to be a really good experience to have under my belt, where I'm like trying to do a lot of different stuff, and I've got a lot of different opportunities to try different things. And on that, I mentioned juking into dream jobs. At a startup, they'll tend not to have an official process for what title you get given. And I was hired as a software developer. I wanted to do data science and machine learning in my career. I started doing a bit of that internally for some projects. And then I said I want to negotiate my role, and they're like, "Oh no, They don't want to pay me more." But I'm like, "Oh, it's okay. I just want to change my title on LinkedIn." And they're like, "Oh yeah, you can do that. Do that if you want. That's fine." As a startup, they can do that. It's just like nothing's official.
Yeah.
But as soon as I put data science on my LinkedIn, recruiters started coming to me for data science roles. So that's how I jumped into the data science industry. You need a PhD to do that. I'm like, this company is calling me a data scientist, therefore I am a data scientist.
Therefore, it's written. Uh,
It is written as it is written, as it is said, I am a data scientist.
what was your experience with the onboarding process at Google?
Oh, it was the most intense. Oh, onboarding. I thought it was interviewing.
Sorry,
Interviewing was
interviewing. Sorry, is interviewing. Sorry,
oh,
is interviewing.
okay. Interviewing at Google. It was the by far I never learned so much in the span of a month, because it was quite fast in terms of all the interviews. We have this cracking the coding interview, this big green book, where if you say how to interview at Google, you always see this big green book. That was the only time I actually learned like some complicated algorithm stuff, where it's like the speed of algorithms, data complexity, all these terms that I should have been taught in my computer science course, but I wasn't. And I learned them for the first time trying to interview for Google. And then since then, I haven't used that knowledge much, but it was just to get the interview stuff and to talk
Yeah,
about, oh, the algorithm complexity. Sometimes I still do use it when I'm building stuff to scale, but yeah, it was very intense. A lot of interviews. You did coding. You have to code without an IDE, so you basically have to whiteboard code versus coding in a Google Doc. You have to just know a language through and through. And it is, if you look at videos online of how they expect you to interview at Google, you see that a lot of it is about communication. Because Google, although it's a big company, they kind of operate kind of like a startup. Like there's not really a strong reporting structure. everyone kind of works independently, and it's a lot of collaborative work. Like I recently did a project where I basically just put out an email to the whole London office, being like, who wants to work on this project with me? So a huge emphasis is on your communication, how good you are to work with, how good you are communicating what you can do and what you can't do, so that people can actually like know where to put you in a project. So yeah, it was very intense. I had to know how to code on a Google Doc, and communication skills was the main focus, and it was
Awesome.
intense in general.
Just in the interest of time, are you okay for me to send you some of these questions to answer sort of outside of
I
this?
think
Would that be
we,
okay?
we, we keep going. Nobody's come to the room yet, and it is like, yeah, just keep them firing. And if not, I'll like take it to my laptop and walk with it. I'll try to get as many answers done now.
What would you give as your one line piece of advice to a junior developer looking for work?
Looking for work.
Yeah.
If you're looking for work, you should take the first job you can get. It's a lot easier to get a job when you already have one. That first job is the stepping point. Do not wait for the perfect first role, because it doesn't exist. You take the first job. I took a test developer job. I knew I probably wouldn't like it, but it gave me that first foot on that ladder. And then the next job I could be a lot more intentional with. The next job I knew, okay, I want to work with Python and AI, so I'll wait for that, because I currently have a job that's easier to interview when you already have a job. So if you're looking for a job, as soon as you get an offer, take it. If it's in tech, take it, and then work on those portfolio projects, because naturally, if there are good projects where it's stuff you're interested in and you're learning the technology you want to learn, eventually you'll get so good at that it will shine on your resume. So work on the things you want to work on in your spare time. If you can do that in your work time, excellent. But if not, make sure you're still making those skills in the area you know you want to work in. I knew I wanted to work in AI. So regardless if my job required it, I was going to be working on that in my spare time, learning about it, learning how to write Python and all that stuff. So those portfolio projects, get those, and then take the first job you could get.
What would you say the mix between applying for roles and continuing to code should be when you're looking for a role? So I think what they're saying is, yeah, obviously you need to be applying for roles and doing personal projects. What's the mix for that?
I don't. I It depends how intense. Let me stop with that. It depends how intense your schedule is. But I mean, you can be applying for roles. Can they overlap? I feel like you could. I don't know how intensely you're working on the project. If you delegate like an hour or two to work on personal projects, and then a couple of other are applying
Yeah,
for roles, I don't see why they can't be in parallel. But I haven't been applying for roles in a while, so
yeah,
that's where ideally you want to do them at the same time. You want to be almost, or maybe if you can't, one day on, one day off, ratchet that system. But I think you need to do both at the same time.
agreed, agreed. I mean, for us, I always say that you should be checking in on new jobs that come available every day. You know, if you've got the time to do that, because they come on and they go so um, quickly. Aside from the typical HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, what languages do you recommend? I know it's
Python.
dependent on Python.
Python. The way I think of it is, again, I'm advocating for my own position, so this is biased. The two languages that I find I use the most, more than anything, and you see this in all of my projects on GitHub, is I use Python for machine learning and backends. So I build like all the stuff in like using cloud functions and stuff, which is like backend technology in Google Cloud. I do all my backend stuff in Python, and then I can also use Python for machine learning and data science, and then all the application stuff. Front ends, I use JavaScript, HTML, CSS. Those two languages basically cover most things. And the beauty of Python is it's one of the go-to client libraries for most new technologies. So if you're doing stuff with 3D, like the Blender application, where you can make 3D stuff, they have a Python scripting terminal. So a lot of Python is used a lot everywhere. And the same goes for JavaScript. So I said Python and JavaScript are the two most utility languages, especially if you want to get near AI or machine learning. Python's the go-to, but even if you don't, it's an easy language relatively to learn versus other languages, and you can use it to make backends as well. So you can do the backends in Python, which is a nice bit cleaner than doing backends in JavaScript, where you've got a mountain of curly brackets. So that's my recommendation.
Yeah, again, there's questions here like Python or C Sharp. What do you think about Rust as a first programming language? I don't know about that.
I don't know enough about what Rust's capabilities are. I think that's what you got to think of about your first programming language. Is if it is like, I believe it's one of those like super reliable very strongly typed. I think it might be used a lot in financial industries because it's very like safe to run. If you want to work in financial industry, perfect. Learn that language that they use. So learn whatever language. If you happen to know the industry you know you want to work in, look in to see what languages they're using. That could be your first language. However, some of those languages can be really complicated. So if it's like graphic stuff and you're learning C++ and stuff, that's going to be very hard on the mind. So I recommend at least one easy, relatively easy utility language like JavaScript or Python. Learn at least one of those in your stack. And then if there's ones that are industry specific, also look into those. So I believe that's how I would approach it. But some of those ones that are for industry are really, really hard. Like I'm trying to learn a bit of the different stuff, and it's like, no, I love Python, JavaScript. Get those easy ones under your belt first, especially
Yeah,
Python. You can use it for everything.
awesome. Well, thanks ever so much. There's some other questions about who this be on YouTube later, etc., and lots and lots and lots and lots of thank yous. So thank you so much for this. Seriously, this has been the chat's been. I've been trying to moderate it here. There's been a lot of sort of just yeah, thanks and really appreciative of your time. Thanks for the energy. Really appreciate that as well. So awesome. I really appreciate your time and thank you ever so much.
No
Um,
worries.
and yeah, we will catch you for the next Careers Week talk tomorrow. And thank you ever so much once again.
No worries. Good luck, everyone.